Today we're finishing up my series on shirt making. I'm going to share with you my best tips and tricks and also the tools that I use to make the best shirts that I possibly can. Hi, my name is Sarah. If you're new here, I make videos about sewing, knitting, and learning to appreciate a handmade wardrobe. If this is your first time here and you have no idea what I'm talking about, I will link the playlist to this entire series at the end of the video. So in case you're interested, you can go back and watch the other videos that are in this series. I made 3 shirts out of a similar fabric, and then I compared the shirt patterns to each other and let you know which one was my favorite. And now we're going to wrap it up with some of the things that I've learned about making shirts over the years. Now, disclaimer time, I am not an expert in sewing shirts. I have made a fair number of them over the time that I've been sewing garments, and everything that I've learned has come from other sources on the internet, and I owe a big debt to Craftsy Unlimited. Like way back in the day, like 10, 12 years ago, I had a subscription, so I watched a lot of their classes, and that is where I picked up a lot of these tips. And this is not sponsored in any way. I just wanted to let you know that I have learned these tips from other sources along the way. So I didn't come up with any of these on my own. So let's just get started with some of the tools and supplies that I use. And these things are not in any particular order. I'm just going to grab something and share it with you. So the first tool that I wanted to share that is helpful with shirt making is a clapper. And no, you're not seeing double. I do have 2 of them. I'll explain that in a second. So a clapper is really helpful when you press your seams with steam and then just put the clapper on for a few seconds. It kind of sets the stitches and your seams lay a little bit flatter. So I bought this particular clapper first, and it's the one that I use the most. It's very lightweight and easy to hold. I have kind of small hands, so this one is easier for me to hold than this one. And by the way, everything that I can link, I will put down in the description box, and some of those are affiliate links, but they will be clearly marked. If you buy something through one of my affiliate links, I will receive a small commission, and thank you so much for your support. But this is my everyday sort of clapper, the one that I use the most, but in particular for shirt making, this is the one that I wanted to share. So this clapper I bought from Wawak, and it's definitely heavier than the other one, and it's a little bit clunkier. So I actually don't use this part as the clapper. I use my other one. If I only had one clapper, then it would be a useful, like dual use tool. But the main thing for shirt making that this is really good for is this little pointy part here is really, really good for pressing collars. So once you get your collar sewn together and you want to press the seams and get those really nice clean corners, you can get into the corners really easily with this sharp pointy edge. So I do find this really, really helpful when I'm sewing shirts or things like jackets that have a collar. To be honest, because I have the 2 clappers, I really don't use this outside of doing collars. So it's not a necessary tool. I wouldn't go out and buy one. If you're new to sewing, you're not looking to collect a bunch of tools. But I do enough sewing where I make collars that I felt like buying this was actually worth it. So I do like having this in my sewing arsenal, and I do find it helpful just to get that nice crisp clean edge on the collar points here. The next tool that I want to share with you are these hump jumpers. So I bought these as a set, so they came together. One is a little bit thicker than the other one. I tend to use this thinner one more, especially for making shirts. If you don't have one of these, the concept is really simple. You just put it behind your presser foot and it raises up the foot a little bit. So if you're going over uneven thicknesses, it just helps you move a little bit more smoothly, because sometimes the fabric can get a little bit caught up and it doesn't want to move underneath the feed dogs. So this tool just helps to keep everything lined up and like moving smoothly underneath the foot. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with these, but I did just want to point this one out because I do use it for a lot of different types of sewing, but definitely for shirt making, this gets a lot of use. So next on the list is an open toe foot. So this one that I have is actually an even feed foot. My machine has a built-in walking foot mechanism. So I do use this foot probably 90% of the time for my sewing, but there are also versions of an open toe foot that are not a walking foot. I do have some others that come with my machine that are just meant for regular sewing. But the point is, I like having this opening here because it makes it really easy to see where you're going when you're top stitching. So I do feel like using this type of foot helps me get a really clean, even line when I'm doing my top stitching. So not just for shirt making, but for all top stitching needs, I like to use this particular type of foot. Now there are other methods that you could use. You can use an edge stitching foot or like a stitch in the ditch foot. It's just a personal preference. I just like having this open toe because it just makes it easier to see where I'm stitching. The next tool that I like to use for shirt making is this Simflex gauge. And I'll pull it out so I can show you what it looks like. So it's this metal gauge and it's flexible, so you can pull it out and space it out. And this is how I mark my buttonhole placement. So when I finished a shirt and I'm ready to mark the buttonhole placement, I'll start like at the bust line, and that's like where my first button goes. And so I'll kind of line that up and then stretch it out and then mark my other buttonholes so that it's evenly spaced. And I don't need to use the guide that comes with the pattern because it's often the buttonholes are not marked in the right place for me. You definitely want to have a button like at your bust line to make sure that it closes there. So I do like to use this gauge. It was not super expensive. I got it a long time ago, so I don't remember exactly how much it was. But I do find this really handy. And for the most part, I really only use this to mark buttonholes. I'm sure there's probably other practical applications, but I can't think of any other way that I've used it. I think it's mostly just for marking where the buttonholes should go on shirts and skirts and dresses, things like that. The next thing I want to talk about is fabric for sewing muslins. So if you follow me along in my shirt series, I've showed you the muslins that I've sewn as we go. There's two main types of fabrics that I like to use for muslins because I do not like to go out and buy muslin because it just feels like a waste to me. So I will use either old bed sheets because I can just use ones that are from my house, or I could go to a thrift store and I can buy bed sheets very cheaply, and one sheet can make many, many muslins. Or if I have leftover fabric from my stash that is similar in weight and fiber content, I'll use that for muslins. So for my shirt making series, a lot of the muslins, after I made the first one, I used the leftover fabric from my previous shirt to sew a muslin. And I like to do that because it's really helpful to me to make a muslin in a very similar fabric to what the finished product is going to be, so I can get a good feel for how it's going to hang on my body. And I also just don't use my leftover fabrics for anything else. For a very long time, I would hoard leftover fabrics, and then I just kept having to buy more and more bins to store it because I just didn't go back and use it for anything for wearable garments. So now I use it for muslin. I find that it's a valuable tool for me, and I don't really consider it to be a waste. I've found that I do need to make a muslin, or maybe sometimes multiple muslins to make sure that I get a good fit. I'm using something that I already have. I don't have to buy anything new. And then when I'm finished with the muslin, I just send it to textile recycling. I also don't bother making wearable muslins because I used to do that, but then I never ended up wearing those garments because they didn't fit all that well because it was a practice garment that I hadn't perfected yet. So now I don't see the point in wasting my time anymore making a complete practice garment. I just do the bare minimum to sew up a muslin, see if I can get the fit right, sew it with basting stitches that are easy to remove. And most of the time I only put one sleeve on too, because I really only need the one sleeve to check the shoulder fit and see how everything looks on. So that's how I make muslins for shirts. And obviously there's different approaches and you can do whatever method works best for you, but that's how I like to do it. The next tool that I think is invaluable for me, this is one of my best tips, is I like to use Wonder Tape. In the context of shirts, I really like to use it on the collar band or sometimes on the cuffs. It's just usually like a 1/4 inch wide tape that you iron on, and then when you wash it, it disappears in the wash, so it's not permanent. So I like to use this for basting a lot. I'll even use it on a button band, like if you do a fold over button band. It can be hard to pin it in place because you're stitching on the right side. Just to give you an example, like when you're sewing a button band, it's a fold over, and you want to top stitch it on the right side, but you're trying to secure this fabric down on the back. It can be hard to pin it and make sure that you're catching everything as you sew. So I'll just put a strip of Wonder Tape on the back here and iron it down so that I don't have to use pins. Then I can top stitch it from the right side so that it's nice and smooth and even, and I don't have to worry about anything shifting. And I'll also use it on like a collar band, which is really nice. On this particular collar band, you actually top stitch it to the outside. So I'll put the Wonder Tape on the reverse side of here, iron it down so it stays in place. Then once again, I won't need to use pins and I can just top stitch it down. And then I will also use it sometimes on the cuffs here, on the underneath side of the cuff. So I really, really like using Wonder Tape, and I use it for a lot of different applications, but definitely in shirt making, it's one of my most used tools. And it's really nice in the collar band in particular because a lot of times if I don't use Wonder Tape, I will often hand stitch it down before I top stitch it. And the Wonder Tape makes it so that I can skip the hand stitching step, which is really, really nice. Another common supply that I use in shirt making, I've gotten some questions about what type of interfacing that I use. I just grabbed a little scrap here from my stash. This is a lightweight fusible woven interfacing that I bought from Wawak. It does have the glue on one side, and then it's just really, really nice and light. And so I really like this type of interfacing rather than the papery kind, because it really does sort of disappear under the fabric, almost like it adds a little bit of body, but it's not too heavy. And I find that this particular weight is light enough that even if I'm making a shirt out of rayon or silk or something, this type of interfacing doesn't make it too stiff. So I really, really like this particular product. I have it in both white and black, and I tend to buy it from Wawak. I think you can buy it in like 5-yard bundles or something. So I do tend to do that, and I just keep a supply on hand all the time, and I use this interfacing a lot. It's so much better than the non-woven papery kind. Then the last supply that I wanted to share, I have a whole drawer full of these, but I just pulled out one to show you so that I wouldn't make a mess out of things. But I do like to buy buttons in bulk. So I've purchased buttons on Etsy and also through Wawak. I like to buy just basic neutral colors and keep them on hand. Sometimes if a shirt is special enough, I will go ahead and buy buttons specifically for that shirt, but for the most part, I tend to use more neutral buttons. So I find that just having a bunch of them is easier than going out and buying buttons for each individual shirt. The other thing that I will do is I'll often recycle buttons. So if I have something that I'm getting rid of and it's not in good shape anymore, I'll just harvest the buttons off of it and reuse them. Or you could even go to the thrift store and purchase clothing that has decent looking buttons and reuse those, because sometimes buttons are expensive and going to the thrift store can actually be cheaper than buying new buttons. So that's just a little tip if you're not already doing that. I do like to recycle my buttons whenever possible, and also I will just buy basic colors in bulk and keep them on hand to use them. Before we go any further, I'll quickly share with you what I am wearing. Today I have on my red cashmere sweater that I got from Nordstrom in 2023. Underneath, I'm wearing my Vogue 8672 shirt that was part of this series, and this is the third time that I've worn it now, so I'm getting a little bit more used to it. I have it on with my Paradise Patterns Protea pants that I made several years ago now. I think I made these back in 2022. Then I just have on my white Veja sneakers and my secondhand Raffia Cezanne bag. All right, now let's talk about some of my best tips. A lot of these experienced sewists will probably already know about, but just in case you didn't, I did want to point them out because they have been helpful in my shirt making journey. Now my sewing machine does have a free arm, but I have it set up so that it's flat in a table, and it's quite heavy. It's about 30 pounds. So I don't want to be pulling it in and out of the table all the time. It's kind of annoying to do that. So I have basically operated without a free arm for about 15 years now. So if you don't have a free arm accessible to you, you can just turn your pieces inside out when you're sewing them. So let's say I needed to do the top stitching on my cuff and it's a narrow circumference, but I don't have a free arm. I would simply turn the sleeve inside out like this and then slide my fabric under the foot and top stitch on the right side here. I'll try to put in a little demonstration because I don't think I'm showing you very well, but it's just easier to do it this way. And then you're top stitching on the right side. You can access everything without a free arm. So I do use that tip quite a lot with my sewing because, like I said, I'm not going to be lifting my sewing machine out of the table all the time. It's just too much of a pain. So this is how I have operated without a free arm for so many years. The next tip that I wanted to share is when you're setting in a sleeve, I highly encourage you to use 3 lines of basting stitches instead of 2. Now, unfortunately, I can't show you because I'm wearing this shirt, but I did mention that when I was sewing this shirt, I got more puckers than I usually get. And I think it's because I was being lazy and I only used 2 lines of basting stitch, whereas when I use 3, it goes in a lot more smoothly and more evenly. It holds the gathers in place a little bit better. It just makes it easier to ease in the sleeve cap when you have more lines of basting stitches. So I do use that tip quite a lot, although I didn't on this one and then suffered the consequences. I'll try to show you one of my other shirts so you can see the difference. So on this shirt, I did use the 3 lines of basting stitches, and you can see how neat and even it is without any puckers, as opposed to the one that I'm wearing that does have more puckers. So it is a little bit of a pain to have to do that extra line of basting stitches, but I do think that ultimately it's worth it. Another trick that I like to use is that when you are sewing a curved shirt tail hem like this, I like to thread trace the hemline, because when you're doing a curve, it can be a little bit challenging to get the hem pressed nice and even. So in this particular case, I think this one was a 3/8 inch hem. So I just went through and I sewed a line of basting stitches 3/8 inch away from the edge, and then I used that as my pressing guide. So then I went to my iron, turned up the hemline on that basting stitch and pressed it, and then I removed the basting stitch, It's just an easier way to press your hem and get the curves like nice and even without having to use a seam gauge or some other method that's a little bit more difficult to do on a curved edge. Another thing that I do, which probably a lot of you will not agree with, but I just don't see the point. Personal preference wise, I never wear my shirts buttoned all the way up to the top because I just think it looks a little bit too stiff and formal on me. And so because I never button my shirts all the way up to the top, I usually skip putting the button and the buttonhole on the collar stand because I'm just never going to use it. I'm never going to button it all the way up there. And my machine is a little bit finicky with buttonholes. It does not like to do buttonholes on an uneven surface. And by nature, because of the bulk, there's going to be a little bit of unevenness on this particular spot where you're putting the, actually it'd be this side, where you would be putting the buttonhole. And so I just don't bother putting the buttonhole up here. And to me, it doesn't look weird because I don't ever button my shirts all the way up to the top. Maybe it's just a lazy person thing, but I just never bother putting that in. And I haven't really noticed that it looks weird or anything. I'm sure some of you might feel differently, but it's just something that I like to skip because why give myself the aggravation if I'm never actually going to use this button up here? This is not so much a tip per se, but just more of a warning, I guess. I would say do not skip grading and trimming your seams, especially on the neckline here. Even on a shirt where it's generally not super bulky, it just helps a lot around these edges here to go ahead and trim your seams and clip the curves and just remove some of that bulk. Because when you go to flip everything down and do the top stitching, you'll be thankful that it's a little bit less bulky. You can use your hump jumper, like I said before, to get over some of those uneven surfaces, but it's just really helpful to remove bulk. And so that's one step that I never skip. I always try to trim my seams and reduce bulk whenever I can. Another thing is that for some reason, some shirt patterns will tell you to clip into the seam allowance of the shirt when you're sewing the collar band on before you sew. And I never do that. I don't like doing that because I just find it's a little bit too easy to clip too far and then you've got a hole in your seam. So I always just ease it in as I go and then I do the clipping after I've stitched the seam, not before. Another thing that I like to do, and this is just personal preference, is a lot of the times in order to reduce bulk and have everything as flat as possible, I like to press my seams open. And if I'm using a serger, I will often go ahead and serge my seams before I even sew them. I'll just take my fabric to the serger, serge the edge without cutting anything off, and then I'll stitch the seam. I just find it easier to do it before I stitch a seam than it is to do it after. And then of course I just press it open so it lays nice and flat. There's nothing wrong with serging the seams together and pressing them to the side, but it's just a personal preference thing that I like to do because I just prefer the way that it looks as opposed to pressing them to the side. And then my final tip is, let's say you don't want to use the Wonder Tape or you don't want to top stitch on the outside of your collar band or your collar at all. I will occasionally, if it's a really nice garment that I want to have a really beautiful finish, instead of top stitching it, I will sometimes hand stitch it down to the inside. I didn't on this particular one, so I don't know why I'm showing you this. But just in case you don't want to have any visible top stitching, you don't want to stitch in the ditch, you can just hand stitch the collar band down. So I will do that every once in a while, especially for something like if I'm using a rayon or a silk or something really lightweight. Instead of top stitching, I will sometimes do an invisible hand stitch on the inside and then you can't see it from the outside and you don't need to use top stitching. So that's a tip that I don't utilize a lot, usually more when I'm doing lightweight fabrics, but it is something that I will do every once in a while. And it does make a really beautiful, clean finish on the outside. So those are all of my top tips for making shirts. Please share down in the comments any tips that you have for making shirts. I would always love to learn new things, and I think that we can help each other. If you enjoyed this video and did get some value out of it, I would really appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up because it helps more people find my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Next week we'll be doing a styling video. I'm really excited to get out some of my spring and summer pieces and start trying to figure out ways to wear them. So if you're interested in watching that, you might want to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you again next week.